Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay and welcome to episode 8. I'm interviewing John Brennick, who's worked on Planet of the Apes, Real Steel, The Hobbit 2, and dozens of other really awesome films. And this is a great one, so let's dive in.
Welcome to the Allan McKay Podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on AllanMcKay.com.
Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay, and welcome to a new episode. I'm doing one with John Brennick, who is a really good friend of mine who I've known for quite a while now. And the whole time I wanted to launch this podcast, I've always kept him in mind because he's such a charismatic, really genuine, really just awesome guy, and I thought he'd be a lot of fun to do. Now, that being said, he just recently came off of working for Weta on both The Hobbit 2 and Planet of the Apes 2 as well. So this was really interesting. It was a lot of fun, and we got a lot of good insight both about starting your career as well as both dealing with burnout and I guess long-distance relationships too, since he was in the middle of one while working on those two films back-to-back on the other side of the world. Now, this has been a really cool episode because it touches on a lot of really great content, and it was a lot of fun just to kind of sit down and just discuss a lot of this with him. And let's get into this. A couple of things first. I just got back from South Carolina, so that's finally over with, which was great. Just obviously being away from LA and being away from my office is obviously taking a bit of a toll, so I'm kind of in catch-up mode now. But that being said, it's Thanksgiving around the corner, and Halo has just come out, and I was basically dedicating a lot of this year to Denzel Washington's new movie, The Equalizer, as well as Halo. So I worked with Blur Studio creating a lot of really epic shots for that project. So that was a lot of fun doing the cinematics. We did about 70 minutes, I think, or roughly around there. So well over an hour of content for that project. It was by far the most ambitious thing Blur had ever done. So it was a lot of fun to work on that. That is mainly it, and also Destiny as well, which another Microsoft game came out not too long ago too. I'm speaking at Autodesk University next week. So if you haven't signed up, then I'm pretty sure it's too late. But I'm going to be talking on how to 10x your career. So in other words, how to really start to put yourself in the mindset of how to really improve your career, how to really to step it up. And that's going to be a lot of fun. I've done a few career talks as well as visual effects presentations in the past at AU in Vegas. And this one, to me, originally when I agreed to do it, I said I'm not going to do it unless it's to do with more this subject, because I think it's one that is heavily neglected and there's a lot that we can really kind of contribute to it. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Other than that, if you guys have any questions, that's one thing I'd love is I get a lot of email about this podcast, and it's been really cool. It's just been so great to kind of hear from everyone, from both people who are in the field to presidents of some really big companies to also just everyone else who's been really inspired. But if there's specific subjects that you want to hear or more questions you have, whether it's about your career or where you want to go, it might be how to get more job interviews, or it might be more to do with how to move into more of a supervisor role. Whatever it is, I'd love to hear from you guys and just kind of see where I can help out there. And again, with this podcast too, I'm really trying to tailor the content to be more towards that, to really kind of make sure that every episode is beneficial in that way. Now, that all being said, I think in December, just as an experiment, I'd love to start doing a few more solo episodes. So in other words, doing more content. I know last episode, and again, being in Florida and South Carolina, jumping around, there were a few glitches with the episode, so it's bound to happen, and I'm definitely still finding my stride when it comes to this. But Yeah, it's going to happen from time to time. But that being said, just if you have any questions, fire them out to me. I'd love to hear from you. And also, if you get a chance, please share this episode around. I'd love for everyone to have a chance to experience this. That being said, let's dive into the episode. Here's an interview with John Brennick, who's worked for Digital Domain, Weta, and dozens of other really high-profile studios and high-profile films as well. All right, so let's jump in and let's just start out really quick with you explaining a bit of who you are and what the hell you do for a living.
My name is John Brennick. I'm a visual effects compositor, working in the industry since about 2005. Yeah.
Okay, you want to flesh out a bit more about that? No, what studios have you worked for?
I started out at Warner Brothers back in the days of Curious George as my first feature. After that, I went right to DD, and I started out doing paint and roto at DD on a film called Zoom with Tim Allen and Chevy Chase. I think it's right in the straight to $4.99 DVD spot now. So
yeah, proudest moments right there.
Yeah. That's the one that
you're calling up IMDb occasionally. Can you remove that, please?
Yeah. No, that's the one I didn't sign up for. I think my mother's the only one that congratulated me on that one. So, and probably the only one that saw it too. After that, what did I do? I was at DD for about 2 years or so, doing paint and roto. And started out that way. Then I going back and doing some commercial work. Lived in Dubai for a little while, doing some commercial work over there. And then just bounced around.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I guess we'll cover a bit more about like your career and how you got started. But like one thing we were talking about was when you first went to DD, and I assume that's going to be a pretty pivotal part of your career in the beginning. Obviously, going to like a big studio, especially early on, rather than it being more kind of like down the line, towards 10 years in or whatever. So I mean, how many years in was it when you first got to DD?
I started out I graduated college in 2004, so I'd been interning in New York. I went to college in New York at School of Visual Arts, and I had I started out basically interning in like 2002, 2003, but I didn't get into features until 2005. So right after Curious George, I went straight to DD,
mm-hmm.
and I had an interview with a guy who has since passed away, Lee Croft, who great guy, and really I came from an After Effects background, so I didn't have the West Coast sort of compositing fundamentals. So everything was all After Effects. So it kind of really wasn't as transferable as I had hoped it would have been. Concept is there, but
especially Nuke back then, and especially Nuke at DD.
Completely, yeah. Nuke back then, and Nuke 4.6 back in like the version. I think I started like Nuke. I think it was Nuke 4.5 or 4.6. Was just as rudimentary as it gets. It was one of the most intimidating packages I've seen.
When did the Foundry touch us? Like 2006, around then?
It was that. Well, they had been in talks, I believe. I'm not really privy to that, but I'm pretty sure it was right around 2008, 2007, 2008 was when they had started the move, and they were talking about it in the end of 2006, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember when I first started, again coming from an After Effects background where everything's just right in front of you, and going into Nuke where it opens up and it's just the DAG, and all you have is this empty template of nothing. This empty canvas of nothing. No viewer. The viewer didn't even show up. It was just a place to pick the node you want to use, and so it was great because that was the beginning of my career, and I'm working with some of the most talented people I've ever met. And these are the guys that were credited on Titanic. And they just got done doing iRobot, and really groundbreaking stuff at the time, and really impressive stuff. They did stealth as well, So it was kind of always a goal to get there, to get to DD. So I was really fortunate to kind of, even start out doing roto paint there and make that the beginning of everything, and really base all of my compositing experience was all started right at DD, which mm-hmm. at the time they were one of the top compositing companies in the world.
What was it like on day one?
Oh, day one. Day one was Day one was stressful. Day one was you're trying to do the best work you can, but you're also trying to, keep your shit together. And DD back in the old days was funny because DD was had a reputation for being a pretty heavy drinking house.
Around when Stealth was going on, I was drinking there a lot. One of my buddies, Barry, he was DJing there, so we'd go over there and put out $20 in the jar and do the tiki nights before Karen Galikas destroyed the whole thing.
You put your money in the jar, and next thing you know, it's the rest of the night is sort of hazy.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I would say the hardware blew me away. At least maybe not in commercials as much, but in feature films, like the computer hardware in the offices were so run down. And I remember when I first moved back to Australia, I had like a $15 Logitech keyboard or whatever, and one of my friends was like, you're not keeping that? Can I have it? Because they would have like the original standard Windows 104 keyboards. It didn't have a Windows key or anything. It was like a beige like keyboard with all the dirt in all the creases and everything because it's 20 years old.
Yeah.
So like me getting rid of my 1-year-old like $10 keyboard or whatever was just like, oh, it's a hand me down, because they'd have like old lazy boys with like holes in them and everything.
Oh man, a place was so rudimentary, and that was one of the most fascinating aspects of that shop. Was you go inside and it wasn't polished, it wasn't clean. It was when I first started, I was working over where the Google building is now. Yeah. Across the street in the warehouse, and we were up in basically looked like a cabinet making shop. I forget what they called it. It was I think it was a parachute building or something like that. And basically we had 2x4s hammered into as railings, and it was literally just pieces of plywood that were hammered into the steps. I mean, no carpentry whatsoever. It was like, we need a shop now. Let's do this, and they ended up putting it together. So we were working behind the commercials area for the feature side, and they just stuck us up in this wooden room, and it was pretty crazy. But the thing was, they'd turn out incredible work regardless of that. They didn't need the polish, they didn't need the shine, and they just did it.
Yeah, you don't spend $10,000 on like a fancy sign. You spend $10,000 on getting someone in that can do some great work.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of lends itself to, it's really the people that were sitting at the seat at the time that produced that work for DD. It wasn't the computers. The computers help, but I think you have that level of experience that the computers really help out doing R&D, and they help the learning curve. But when people are at that level, they've acclimated past that learning curve. So they...
Yeah. Do you know a compositor named Paul Kerwin? I just remembered him the other day. His nickname's Krusty. Just because we were talking about...
I do know Krusty.
You do know Krusty?
I do know Krusty was the first comp soup on Zoom.
Oh, really?
He was the comp soup on Zoom. He was him and Lee Croft were really good friends, and Krusty would come into my cubicle. I doubt he remembers me, but he would come into the cubicle, and he would sit there with Lee, and Lee had a refrigerator that he kept stacked with Coke Zero, and he had a bottle of Jack Daniels that was so big it would come with a free T-shirt that he would get, and he would keep that on the desk, and everybody would come and congregate near the desk, and they just hang out, and they would shoot the shit for like a good hour, and Krusty was there right after dailies. Krusty and Lee were there, and it was actually one of those like highlight moments where I was fortunate enough to get to sit next to my soup when I first started at DD. So everybody was off on the side in their own cubes with other artists, and I was sitting next to the paint roto soup. It was a really interesting guy, really, really intelligent, and him and Krusty would come in, and they'd just sit there and go back and forth, and I would just sit there with my headphones and like one of my headphones kind of off my ear, just listening to these guys go at it.
Maybe I'll learn a secret or two.
Yeah, seriously, like just
now I can comp better.
Help me get rid of this edge,
I was just about to say, Matt Control on the edges, you're done. Yeah, like I worked with him, almost 20 years ago now, 15 years ago, and it was just before he went to go work on Lord of the Rings, and he had a nickname from working on Titanic, and that's what made me think of it, is because he moved back to Australia and he got the nickname Titanic Boy because he worked with all these clients over there, and there's like one client from Japan. We had a lot of Japanese clients coming into the studio we're at, and yeah, I guess he kind of got dubbed because of his Titanic success, Titanic Boy.
Yeah.
So I remember he's
really smart guy.
Yeah, super talented.
Super talented. Had a really great eye, and just a fun guy to just sort of get to sit there and listen to, and listen to him go off on it with Lee.
Yeah.
But those are like the older days,
And yeah, I mean, I actually do like the fact that DD refers to DD as version 1, version 2, version 3.0 because
it's
you know
relevant.
you have those studios. I mean, Blur I think is up to like version 5.0 in my opinion, but like you go through these massive changes, like waves that happen that really change the philosophy of the companies and who is actually there as well, and lots of things. And it's kind of hard to relate a lot of times, like, oh, the studio you're at now is not the studio I was at, or back in the day, whole different things. So,
Yeah.
But what was it? I don't know. Like, what was it like for you? Because you started out in doing paint and roto, right?
So I started out in paint and
hard
roto.
work.
That was gnarly stuff. That was it was good though, because you did your time, and you grew an appreciation for. I have an appreciation for it now, and still to this day. I mean, it's we're doing a lot of our own. If we can do our own paint now, we'll do it. If we can do something quick, we'll do it. And I think it's still part of my everyday job now. Is doing the stuff that I learned back then. So that was really the building blocks to doing this stuff today. But it was great because seeing the level of work that they were doing at that time. I remember I walked in for my interview, and they sat me down and they gave me a shot from iRobot and had me do a paint shot from iRobot. And I'm just like, and it was in combustion at the time, which I knew.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my paint work in combustion. I'm just like, oh my God, this is all right. Let's do this. But I think it was awesome because now you have a really appreciation for doing the stuff now. Knowing
Absolutely.
that I started there and getting to learn from the people, that were as good as they were,
Yeah, I think it's actually really. I mean, we've talked about this to death, but I strongly think that when you're starting your career, you really need to put in the hard yards and like go through the trenches, and otherwise later on, like you're not going to have that experience of making those mistakes or doing the brute work. And even starting out especially for 3D, but like starting as a generalist, I think is very pivotal, because otherwise you just go straight into effects, then you're not going to understand how the rest of the pipeline works.
Yeah.
And I've got a really shitty name for it, but like I've kind of really thought about that a lot. Is like, I always call it the trifecta, just for lack of a better word, but I do think it is important like to identify probably the three closest things to what you work in. So effects, I think compositing is definitely a big one. I think coding is another big one as well. Beyond that, maybe lighting, but it really depends. But I mean, learning a bit about these other areas will help you be able to work better and more efficiently, as well as work better with other teams.
Right. Yeah.
Knowing a bit of what they do, and that's why actually for effects people, I always say learn a bit of compositing, and I always respect compositors who learn a bit of 3D, because then when you need something, you don't say, hey, I need this thing. You're able to say, look, I need a depth mat. I need you to make sure you clamp these things. It's
right.
loaded in the menus here. That way everyone has a better understanding overall.
Yeah, and you also know what to expect too. You also know what to expect turnaround time.
Yep.
It's one thing to sit there and say, hey, I need this rotoed, and to have unrealistic ideas as to when it should be expected to be done.
Yeah, it's true.
And next thing you know, people start getting angry because they had these unrealistic ideas as to this should have only taken a day. You're crazy. It should take at least 2 or 3 days to get that done. So, it allows you to refocus your efforts on the things that you can do within that time span of when it should actually take that period of time, as opposed to saying, okay, I don't know how long this takes. I didn't have to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And
I've got an iconic story just of where I had a director once tell me day of delivery, like he wanted some water dripping down his character's face, close up shot of a character, and he quoted like 20 minutes for the turnaround. No. And the scene is so big because the way this studio is at, like we didn't split stuff up, so the entire scene was several gigs. So it took 20 minutes to load the
the
file. Yeah. So it was just one of those things. Like, I didn't even stress about it. It was just, I had a big grin as I went back to like my department and had a bit of a chuckle about it. And like, I gave him a 2-hour turnaround, which again is insane. It's suicidal, but that was kind of the times that we were kind of working within. But just to hear it be 20 minutes, it's just like, no, dude, like 2 hours, and like anywhere else it'll be 2 days. So
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is, you're right. I mean, the more people have an understanding of it, I will say, and I will comment that I think it's a double-edged sword sometimes where, and I don't want to talk smack about directors, but I have worked with a few feature directors now who came up from working in 3D, and even other people who don't work necessarily in 3D. And I think it's one of those things that if you know enough, just enough to get yourself in trouble, you know what I mean? So with them, they want to prove that they know 3D for a start, so they want to try and talk your talk to kind of show off, but also maybe they have diluted understandings of how things work because they got a little bit of an understanding in their 3D film class, because of that, I've had people, where we're doing stuff has never been done before, all simulation, and I'm having to get like supercomputers in specifically to do it. And I'm having to explain that this is going to be a couple of days to get an iteration out. And I get a call at midnight, and it's like, I figured it out. What if you just render in tens? Then you'll be able to get it done quicker. And it's just like, dude, like rendering isn't even like on my radar right now.
I'm nowhere near that stage.
I'm worried about, trying to sim this shit. So. But, it's one of those things where they're like, oh, if you render in tens, then it'll be quicker. You're rendering every 10 frames. It's just like, dude, like, I appreciate it.
You're in the wrong process right now. You're in the total wrong step of the pipeline.
Yep. They're trying to help. You want to hug
You're
them.
jumping right to the end, buddy.
That's right. But, no, it's cool. And, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I solely agree that doing the hard yards, I mean, it pays off in the end, absolutely. And the more you understand of other areas, too, it's definitely going to help in the long run too.
Yeah, I think it's good to address the learning curve early on. Address your learning curve early on before it becomes dangerous and expensive for you to approach that learning curve. Basically, I mean, when you're starting out, they can afford to have you learn that stuff. You're not making the money that you're making later on.
Mm-hmm.
So you can spend more hours in the day figuring something out and trying things 3 different ways. But by the time you're sitting in that seat, it's hopefully, you've learned enough to really be able to apply those different things. Like, I remember I tried that and it definitely didn't work as fast as I thought it was going to. So I'm probably going to scratch that one off my list. And I think, and that's really the most beneficial aspect of doing that. And like learning paint specifically is one of those things that I think it's pivotal as a compositor to understand paint, because you'll sit there and you'll there's how many ways to skin a cat, they always say, but it's good when you know the ways that you've always found comfortable with, that you've always been able to work well with, and the limitations of certain techniques, so you know which ones to apply here. And then okay, I can abandon that one at frame X, and I can jump onto another idea, as opposed to muscling through just one approach all the way through, which is where it starts getting really expensive.
The more areas that you learn, the more that you can identify. Like you got more tools in your arsenal, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You're not, and more often than not, I see these people they'll try one approach as the answer, and man, that gets painful. But then they'll also, at the same time, they'll also try something that's super technical, but get them a little bit of the way there. But then they end up having to roto quite a good portion of the way through. And I had a really good friend of mine at Weta who would always tell me, he's like, man, it's like I wish I saw more people just like sit down and just roto the hair. Just roto the hair instead of trying like 17 different complex keys to put together and everybody has their own technique, but that's the thing, is he had his approach, and his approach worked really great for him because he didn't spend a lot of time doing all of the different trial and errors. He knew his techniques that worked well, and he would get it, and he would hit these shots out of the park. Really, really difficult, stuff where you don't have the time to really lose when they're screaming for you to have your shot done.
One of the most valuable things it's kind of in the past year or two, I've kind of really identified as being like something that Will set let's say someone starting out in the industry to someone who's really experienced, and that is not about like what buttons you can push, what program you know, but your sheer experience that you have. Like the more experience you have, the more you can look at things ahead of time and identify what problems you're going to run into. And I tend to try and give those pep talks to people I'm souping early on. Like, look, work on the shot, but I'm going to warn you, you're going to run into this and this problem, so be aware of this before you start. And you will get some people who are like, whatever, and then later on they're running those issues, and it's like, But for the most part, I mean, the quicker you can identify which solutions have the best, which are the best solutions, but also which ones will get you closest to the way there.
Right.
And then also brute forcing it the rest of the way, which I find, I don't know if it's like this in comp as much, but for 3D, people love to go technical and try and make shit way more fancy than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're cheating if you do shit the brute force easy way. And the thing is, it's like, no, you're getting it done. You know, there's a big difference.
I completely agree. And at the end of the day, people in the audience aren't looking at your script, you know.
Yeah.
They're not looking at your hierarchies. Or, you know,
it's a bunch of pixels on the screen by the end.
It's about getting your numbers out there and getting this stuff done and looking as good as you can get it with the amount of time that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often people spend time trying to get there the most technical approach, you know, but it's in doing so it's lacking something else, you know, because they spent so much time just in that one area. Whereas I know people that'll get in there and one of their first things that they'll do is because they're so good at doing frame to frame painting, they'll just get in there and paint it.
Yep.
You know, I'm just like, what? That's pretty gnarly stuff that you're doing, you know. And then I know another group of people that, you know, they're all they do is they'll just rebuild everything, you know, dissolving projections, you know. But the best I've seen are the people that really know how to marry those two,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that can do frame to frame painting and, you know, really do understand that, you know, and then know how to complement the projections patches with painting and you know, spline and grid warping stuff back into place. And, you know, I think that's really, going back to what you were saying before about DD, I think that was the best aspect of what I was doing was getting to learn those tools from the people that developed the tools firsthand and learning that aspect at a time where you really had some of the best talent under that roof at one time, you know. And but I think it's super critical learning that stuff early on, because you have no idea at midnight when you're pulling your hair out, you pull, you know, something out of your back pocket that was from before, you know, because you've done it so many times it becomes muscle memory.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's the foundations of everything you do anyway.
Yeah, you know, and having that stuff be a muscle memory is invaluable, because you don't have to think, you just do it, you know?
Yep.
So I think it's that thing is pretty pivotal, you know.
Mm-hmm. And Real Steel was the first feature you did a DD that you did as a compositor. So I mean, what was it like coming back again, you know, as a comper rather than being more in the roto department?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So I had left for a little while, and I'd done commercials for quite a little bit and bounced around doing some features elsewhere. But to kind of come back to DD and start anew was pretty incredible. And I was fortunate enough to have the comp soup, Mike Melchiorri, was the first. He was the first compositor that I worked with when I was DD back in 2006. So my very first shot was a shot for Mike, and I remember I was doing something like rotoing helicopter blades, and they were replacing the helicopter blades with CG helicopter blades, you know, because whatever the live action ones didn't look good enough. So they didn't look real enough. So they ended up putting in these rotoing that stuff out and putting in these signs or whatever out in the middle of the desert. And I remember talking to some Melchiorri about it, because again, I was learning a whole new way to composite, not in After Effects, but I was learning node-based compositing at the time. And I remember going to Melchiorri at the time saying like, hey, would you mind if I looked in your script, and if I have any questions, could I ask you? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever, you know. And so I would go in, I would look at his stuff, I'd sit down with him for like 10-15 minutes. I'd just walk up to his office, knock on his door, super incredibly gracious with his time. We would just sit there and he would explain every, different types of blurs he was using, why he was using different types of edge blurs, and it was pretty awesome. And so once I got to go back for Real Steel, it was a pretty incredible moment to have him be my comp soup, and kind of get to that point and really help out and be of help on that team for him, and see where he's gotten to in his career and get to see him with that. It was really humbling, to sort of be around that level of talent all at one time. And
that's great.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty rad.
Yeah, and what do you think? I don't know. I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but what do you think was your favorite project at DD to work on?
Oh man, it was Real Steel.
Yeah.
Yeah, by far. Yeah, Real Steel. Real Steel, in a close second, would be Oblivion.
Yeah.
Oblivion was truly that was a passion project.
And you were working next to Trip, so you guys were teaming it up for that.
Yeah, Trip was on Iron Man at the time, and he was a couple of cubes down, but
he was in LA last week. I didn't even know. He invited me out to drinks.
I saw that.
I didn't check Facebook enough, and I checked the day after, and I'm like, oh, my bad.
I had a musical I had to attend to. You could probably cut that part out.
He's going to be like, you said that you were homesick. Asshole.
Son of a... yeah, no, that was a good project. That was a really, really just... There are very few projects that you get to work on. And I'll always say that my girlfriend just asked me the other day. She said, well, what are the favorite projects? I don't know. She's doing something sneaky for my birthday, I think. So she's tying my work into it. And she goes, what are your favorite projects that you've worked on? And I said Curious George because it was the first one. And then I said Real Steel for sure, and Oblivion and Apes 2. And I said, and it's because those projects are so rare that you get to work on something where you feel like you're a part of something really, really great, know. And at the time, Real Steel was was a dream job. I mean, it was.
Yeah, you got to stare at Hugh Jackman all day long.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to stare at that mug? Who doesn't want to stare at that mug? And it was incredible because to this day, it's one of those things at DD that everybody said was the cleanest, smoothest show. I mean, we had the VFX soup on it was Eric Nash, and dealing with Eric was a blessing. I mean, this guy was just such a nice guy, and you come in and there's no wedging. You didn't have to wedge stuff. He knew what he wanted. So he would tell you like, nah, pull the magenta out of this, right in this area, just lift this area up over here a little bit, and I like it, because the pipeline was built so well at that point that the stuff coming out of the box, I thought it was a joke when I first got there. I thought it was a trick. They gave me a shot, and they're like, all right, well, if you could just start working on this, that'd be great. And I look at it, and I sit down. I'm literally going through the roto folder, bringing in the mats, and I'm looking at the CG, and I'm just like, I don't know what you guys want me to do with this. I mean, it's pretty spot on. They're like, yeah, no, just lift your blacks and just start bringing your rotos in and getting everything lined up. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I thought it was a trick. And that was really, that one moment kind of spelled out what that project was like, because everything came out so well.
And it's so rare.
It's so rare that you're not breaking CG, you're not pushing stuff around too far, and that the look is established ahead of time, and you're not look deving, halfway through sequences when, the look dev team did an incredible job on that stuff. Plus they had great set references for Adam and Zeus, the robots.
Well, that's at least the one advantage is that you're doing robots, and I'm not saying it's easy, but it definitely is going to feel a little bit more comfortable than, let's say, if we were to talk about apes,
Yeah.
So, at least in that way, you've got, what it's going to take to make it look right,
Yeah, I mean, it's been tried and tested enough times where people know what metal looks like, and it's you don't have and the motion capture they had was incredible. I mean, some of the riggers that they had on Real Steel were just, I mean, incredibly top notch. And you see these robots get in there and they felt heavy, they
Mm-hmm.
felt massive, they didn't feel like they were doing backflips all over the place and,
Yep.
and moving faster than they should be moving.
Well, you look at iRobot, because
Yeah.
you already mentioned that, but like that's kind of the polar opposite. It was beautiful, but what is it, the G4 Max? You've got like a G4 Mac running around doing karate, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's like they're very athletic, and that was because back then it was a bit more cool to make things a bit more fantastic. But
Yeah, and I
know.
think once it starts getting grounded,
Yeah.
and you start grounding those robots in there, it starts feeling even more realistic.
Yeah.
And they start feeling slower and sluggish, and that was when you start seeing those come together in the comps. The comps feel better because everything's tying in together, and that was what made you realize that you're working with a pretty incredible team because all the bases are covered.
Yeah.
The motion control, the mocap, and the lighting, rendering, texturing, everything all down the pipeline. By the time it got to comp was there. The environments team was incredible. They had an incredible environments team to populate the stadiums at the time, and it was just I think that was probably my favorite project of all time, and it was poetic too to kind of get to work with Melchiorri as my first job back when my first job was with him, my very first shot.
Yep.
So that, and then I'd say Oblivion was the close second.
Mm-hmm. And what did you do on that? I never asked.
I was a comper on that.
No shit.
We had, no. I know, right? I know. Shocker. We did the what sequence did we do? We did all the drones. The what do you call them? The little little drone ball, whatever. We did all that stuff. We were working pretty closely with Pixo as well.
Because Nadell and a bunch of other guys, like they were all working on it over there.
Yeah, they did some awesome work on that stuff. But we were working, we did like all the library sequences and all the TET stuff at the end, and a lot of just anything that had the I forget what they call those things, the things that suck the water out, of the aliens that were sucking all the water out. We did all that stuff as well, but that was a pretty incredible show because it was a small team, and working that closely with Kaczynski and getting to hear his notes firsthand was pretty incredible. And that guy's got an eye, man. He's so good.
I had the opportunity to work with him not long ago, and I was scheduled on it, but I needed a break really bad. And he was doing a Assassin's Creed commercial, so it would have been cool.
Man, he's awesome.
Yeah.
I would work on any show that guy does. If they had a Tron 2, I would jump at the chance to work on that one. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he wants, and he comes from an architecture background, so it's funny seeing how he composes his shots, and they're really beautiful the way he composes his frames. So, you get to work with those kinds of clients there, and I think that's one of the best parts about
it's great.
getting to be there. And that was one of the most humbling aspects, is to get to sort of see who you get to work for and feel like you're doing something that you've always wanted to do since you were a kid. Like sitting in that seat was arriving and being where I always kind of hoped I would have get to.
Do you think there's ever been any special things you've done in your career to get work?
To get work?
Yeah. Any strategies that's like, like this is something I've done, it's always worked out well for me?
Yeah, just hustling, man. That's it. Like literally, it's just
24/7.
20. Yeah, I mean, but I think that's the whole. That's just kind of the people I went to school with. That was the way we worked. We were the kids that were in the labs till 2 a.m. We were always there till they were closing up the labs. We would. Every week we had, my very first compositing class, we had this teacher, Eric Reinfeld, who's, to me, one of the greatest influences I've had. And he would assign us a 30-second commercial every week. And that commercial, we would have to shoot it, produce it, shoot it, edit it, and then do the VFX ourselves with our sound design on our own every single week. So that homework was like 40 to 50 hours worth of work a week. And it was intense. And if you didn't have it, and if it sucked, then it would show up on your grade. And so there's a group of us, we would just do that every single week. We'd always do them together. And I remember every week we would stay up from Tuesday till Thursday morning straight. And then we would sleep Thursday, and then we'd have class again Friday, So we made sure
healthy.
it was awful, absolutely awful. Taking that ephedra and downing ephedra with Code Red Mountain Dew was pretty good, man. But I think that basis and that foundation is that thing, that was the trick, but it's not a trick though. It's just showing up, and I feel like just working hard because it's what you want to do, and loving what you're doing, and I think after a while people sort of see it. People recognize that you're doing it because you love it, and they appreciate that,
Even when you apply for, like, let's say you're on a Weta, did you put down a lot of references when you went there?
No, I got recommended for Weta. So a couple of my friends were trying to get me in, and I wasn't at the spot where I was able to go in my life. So I never took that. I never jumped on the opportunity to go. But when it ultimately presented itself, I said, yeah, now is the time where I can do it. So I was recommended, and then once they ran me through the interview process, I had to just update my IMDb and go through an interview process that lasted about a half an hour or so, and talk to the comp soups and the leads and whatnot.
Did you get drilled for many technical questions during that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, most of it was about, because I was jumping onto Hobbit.
Which of these layers did you multiply? Which ones did you...
Yeah. What's the math of your...
If you get fired, do you screen it?
Yeah.
Or do you overlay it?
Exactly, right.
Screen everything.
They're more like, so how much do you truly love stereo work and working with amazing green screens? And I said, sign me up. It was basically how comfortable are you with keying, and how are you with stereo? And I bullshitted, and I said I'm great, good with that stuff. No, I think that that was pretty much it. It was just how are you with this stuff, and do you feel comfortable with this, and how are you with long hours? And Weta was some of the craziest hours I've ever done in my life. And I remember you and I were talking when I was out there, and it was 100-hour weeks sometimes. Yeah. And 7-day weeks I was on 7-day weeks for like 6 or 7 weeks straight.
Like I will say that about Weta is, like, I don't think it's a secret. It's like the thing about Weta is they do amazing work, and it's not a bad thing at all. It's just basically when you go in, it's typically very high demanding place that requires, like, okay, we're going to pull off miracles and we're going to get a lot done, but it's going to take a lot to get there, and we'll make sure that you're compensated for it, but when you're here, you're here. And especially, typically everyone is there as a transplant. It's rare that you're coming from New Zealand. You're typically coming from the UK, Australia, or the US. Yeah. And, so it's kind of like, I think it is an advantage, or it can be that you go there, you're typically not going to have your family, so you kind of go there and you just
do it. Yeah. You're just there to do one thing, and if you can find the time to go do the touristy stuff, that's cool. But I know
there is no touristy stuff in the Wellington area. It's all in the other.
Yeah, it's all. Yeah, you have to take a little bit of a hike to get out there. But I think once you're there and you're on that little island, basically you're there doing what you're there to do, and you that's what you signed up to do, and it's, I gotta say though, it was incredible. I mean, I had quite a few breaking moments on Hobbit where I was just like, I was questioning if this is really what I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure if that's really what I want to do anymore, because it was just, the hours were pretty taxing. But there were some incredible human beings there that I got to confide in and really befriend, that became really close friends of mine even to this day. And if it weren't for them, there's just no way. But once you get past that and you push through and you start seeing the stuff deliver, it's such a great experience. Once Hobbit was over, we jumped onto Apes. Apes was something else. Apes was like, I remember sitting there seeing those renders come in, and you're seeing these lighting renders. I'm just like, this is incredible. Like, this is Jurassic Park. This to me is what Jurassic Park was when I was a kid. And seeing Terminator 2, like, that was the moment that I was kind of always waiting for, was to be in that moment where you're seeing something that's truly groundbreaking and getting to be a part of that. And it was literally because of all of those people that were there. You're working with some of the most incredibly talented human beings out there, but that was...
I just got it the other day, and like I haven't had time to watch it again since I saw it at the theaters, but I'm like, I just want to click through for a second and see a little bit of it. So I just watched like 10 seconds of one segment. I'm like, so good.
Apes. Was it Apes? Yeah. Yeah, it's bonkers. I mean, and that team that they had there was just, it was remarkable, and their attention to detail is what brings them someplace else. That was the gift of getting to work there. Like, I feel like it really kind of was a gift to get to work there.
Absolutely.
With those people. Besides
Sam Cole, you worked with Florian Schroeder as well, right?
I did work with Florian. I worked with my comp soups were Alfred Morel, Ben Morgan, and Sam Cole and Robin Hollander, and these guys were just. I mean, they're somewhere else. These guys are genuinely somewhere else. Sam Cole's a monster. I mean, that guy's incredible. And
he's a great guy.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. So smart and so witty. And I think that's what you need in that environment at that time. Is really what you need. You need somebody that's not pressing, somebody that understands where you're at and knows how to help you if they can.
He can be a bit of a smart ass.
I love him. He's awesome. It's just listening to his crass mouth was incredible. Especially at 2 a.m. It's needed. It was cool though. You're getting to see those people work firsthand and getting to work with them right next to them was that was a treat.
What about on going back to Hobbit, because I'm gonna just. This is gonna make it a lot freaking easier to edit in a second, but I'll include what you've already said a lot about apes because you covered a lot of great stuff. So we'll do, we'll cover a bit of Hobbit, and then if you want, then we can talk about like more the burnout stuff or whatever a little bit too. But anyway. So, what about on Hobbit? Like, what were the main kind of challenging points for you? Obviously, the tight turnaround. I mean, you were telling me just before you came back for Christmas, there was a week that you guys had to put out like 500 shots still on the final week. Yeah.
It was. We would get these emails that would come in, and they were supposed to be uplifting emails, but they were emails with like 3 weeks out, and it's like just 1,000 more shots left to go, guys. We're right on track, and you're just like, oh my god, there's no way, there's absolutely no way. How are you going to turn out a stereo film, 48 frames a second, completely CG?
I'm sure they have T-shirts that says "Wet a bitch." And
right. It was insane, and so we're getting these emails that are turning out, and it's like go team go, and you're. That was a chore. That was one of the difficulties was mustering it up to say, okay, let's get this next one out the door, and meanwhile the QC process there was pretty rigorous earlier on, and I was on the first sequence I ended up going on to Lake Town stuff at the end, but the beginning the first sequence I started out on was over in Thranduil's lair, where all the dwarves end up getting carried into
the barrel sequence, right?
No, this was before the barrel sequence, when they broke out of that area.
Right.
When they broke out of the elf caves, we were doing the elf cave stuff, and so we have these green screens, and the way they were shot in order to get that film in the can was they just had all these cameras on set, so they have all these green screens set up, and they were challenging. They were some of the hardest green screens I've ever had to work with, and getting through that as well as the stereo aspect of it was the chore.
How do you guys typically do your stereo stuff? Was it like you guys are shooting a stereo, or
yeah, that was all shot native stereo. Mm-hmm. So you'd have your disparities between your two eyes. There was always something. And so
that's tricky.
That was part of what you signed up for, was to make sure that you were cleaning that stuff up at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so that to me was the biggest hurdle on Hobbit, was dealing with all the stereo stuff. And I'm pretty sure that every single person you ask will say it's dealing with the stereo.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of. I didn't realize how hairy those people were until I had to sit down with them in front of me. Everybody was hairy on that show. It was crazy. And so you have that really fine hair running through different shades of green. They're
50 Shades of Green.
Yes.
Can we Cool, yeah.
let's market our own.
Yep.
That's what it was like, though. It was, it's like, we need to extend the set over here. Well, let's put another green board over there. But that green is significantly different, value of green than what the green that's next to it is, right? Like, yeah, no, it's fun, So we had, that was that, but you had to, though, because they had to turn those takes out. They had to just get the stuff. They had so much to shoot, and so that was part of it. That's what you kind of signed up for.
Yeah. What do you think kind of is the reason that Weta, like, what sets Weta aside from everyone else?
I don't know. They're just so technical. I mean, but that's not just that, though. They have so many incredible artists there, like, that are genuinely beautiful, beautiful artists, and there's such a great marrying of the technical aspect. You've got, the guy that won the SciTech Award, the Academy Award for the
skin stuff,
for deep compositing.
Yeah.
Peter Hillman.
They're collecting so many freaking awards for
That's
it.
the thing.
Like,
just,
even as innovating like Mari and Nuke, not Nuke as much, but like all the Nuke tools though. I mean, but all the tools that they're doing is amazing. Yeah, good point. Babe, can you turn the AC off? Thanks, sorry. Almost done.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, though. Is like you have all these guys that are working together. You got like Peter Hillman, who, like you and I have talked about this before. Like the deep stuff that they have over there, it just goes on. Their deep menu just goes on for miles, And every tool is just an incredible tool that, as a comper, you didn't realize you needed until you have it. And once you have it, you're just like, I can't believe I didn't have this before.
That's right.
And I feel like with the support of that, the tech side, it complements the artists, and it's really truly the perfect marriage, because you have people that are passionate about the science side aspect of it, and you have people that are passionate about the artistry, and both of them together, they're truly getting to fulfill their maximum potential, because the person sitting next to them is passionate about what they're doing, so they're going to be the best at their job because they love it, and everybody was always there late. Everybody was, people worked their asses off there, and that was kind of a treat to see. People took their job very seriously there.
Well, it seems like every movie that Weta picks up, at least a majority of them are such iconic films too. It's kind of you're carving out a piece of history right there, and you can't fuck it up. So
yeah,
whether it's Lord of the Rings, or whether it's King Kong, or
Avatar.
whether it's Apes, Avatar. Yeah, I mean it's. Every single one is something that you want to band together, and you're going to want to leave the best thumbprint you can on it.
Yeah, I mean, I see the level of work that they turn out and the time that they turn out into. I remember on Apes, when right at the beginning of Apes, we were working on some Godzilla stuff, and they got some Godzilla sequences in house, and they're like, we have these shots in that they're basically had kind of just nothing to really work with right off the bat. They had models from other shops and whatever that they had to start with, and to see they only had a few weeks to do these shots. These shots were massive, massive shots, and to see how quickly they turned them around and to see how gorgeous these shots were, I was blown away, and one of my buddies sat across from me. He was working on it, and I'd go look at his desk. He was just like, dude, it looks awesome, and I think that's what sets them apart, is they have the capacity, they have such a wealth of talents all under one roof, that everybody there is in that seat for a reason, and that was the treat. When I say that it's a treat to work there, I think that was the treat, was to get to work next to those people and kind of make friends with those people and say that, I got to work with them. That was because most of those people are soups everywhere else,
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the review process like on a typical shot? Like when you're going through, like how much are you being scrutinized when you're putting your work up?
It depends.
Because obviously it's a very high.
It depends on how close to the end of the film you are. It depends on how close you are to delivery.
What's up with that pixel over there? I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's what's its motivation? Okay, I don't see this right now.
It depends on how close to delivery you are, I guess. because when you have that email go out that says you have 750 shots left, with 2 weeks to go, they start loosening up a little bit.
Right.
Earlier on, they're pretty critical.
Yeah, they're like, I want this to be the best green screenshot ever made in history.
Yeah.
We're going to redefine conversational shots.
And you realize that I had one of my first shots there. I remember it was just the stereo was off and it was just inherent in the lens, and so there was a weird bloom coming in, and so I ended up having to rebuild the plate with projections in the right eye. And I remember sitting there just praying to God that stuff makes it through. And the stuff I felt, and that stuff ended up going through, the stuff I felt comfortable about, they're like, all right, you maybe just look at this stuff over here. I'm like, oh, God. Getting those little hairs back, you find yourself tracking patches of hair back in, just,
God.
And, again, that was part of it. That was part of it. That's what you signed up for. And I think it was kind of the fun part, too, in a way.
Yeah.
Is because I think at the end of the day, as painful as it is, when you look back at that and everybody there is doing that, so it's not like it's any special thing. Everybody there is tracking patches of hair and really, really trying to sell that last little bit, that last 2%, that last 1% is that pushing through, like we were talking about before, like the brute force. That's what it really comes down to. And,
completely agree.
And when you look at it afterwards, like, you know what, it's worth it,
And that's one thing too I've seen a lot is when compositors get to actually recreate a shot rather than being like, okay, I'm putting all the layers in, A-Bing it for the most part, and grading the shot and getting it out. But like when you get these tricky shots where you literally are like, okay, I'm gonna have to go and save the day and make this shot work by pulling some miracles off to get it done. Yeah. So I mean, I think that there's a bit of a reward. That's
kind of the if there's the reward at the end of the day, it's knowing what you had to start out with and where you kind of ended up, and they really but again, everybody there is doing that, so nobody had an easy shot in that show. That was the crazy part. Yeah. I remember it was our lunches were event fests. Our lunches, we would go sit out and we would just go sit over at the at the kitchen across the street, and we would just sit there and just vent, and everybody would just sort of talk about an aspect of their shot. It was free therapy.
Warwick Campbell, he's comped at ILM and Weta, like Weta especially a lot. He's on Kong as a senior comper, and he's been back there 100 times. And like he and I used to work together, and he was in the Flame Suite, and I was a senior TD. This is 2002, 2003, and I just remember he was one of those guys I had where one of us every lunchtime, just to get through what we were going through, would call the other one's suite and be like, I need you, so it'd be one of us it would be our turn for that day to go and just vent, okay, client's doing this, all this shit's going on, and you're just there to be like, okay, it's all gonna be all right.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it. And at the end of the day, it puts your shit on your plate in perspective.
And it's not a negative thing too. It's not like bitching about this is all fucked or being negative. It's more about, okay, you need to
let it off your chest. Is what you need to do. You need to take a step back, let everything off your chest, and put things back into perspective. Because,
and then come back in for round two.
Yeah, exactly. You need your second wind, and that second wind comes in when you can be objective and say, lay all the shit out on your plate that you have to deal with, and say, okay, this is important, this isn't as important. And it's almost sort of a way of categorizing and prioritizing the shit you need to deal with. And it's just sort of a way for you to be objective, and it's not for nothing. I mean, there's more often than not our peers, our groups, we would sit there and help each other put things into perspective and be like, well, honestly, then the hair is going to be your biggest challenge. I would just try to put a big dent in that, get it looking like it should 80-90% there, and then focus on getting the rest of the comp in, and then fine tune it afterwards, but get it deliverable now, and then sweeten it afterwards. And sometimes you're so close to it that you just keep noodling that little shit part of it. And you're just like, at the end of the day, it's like, because this is the most tedious part of it, you don't stop sitting keyframes on it, and sometimes you need somebody to remind you, like, you still have the rest of that to finish, right? And you're just like, yeah, all right, I'm done. I'll disable this layer for now, and I'll go back to it after.
I was having the conversation a couple of days ago about that, where it's for me, it's always a race to get it all in perspective and get it out the door. Like get it 90% of the way there, which is the easy part, and then you go and noodle, because you could spend forever working on one piece, and then later on, when you see it in context of everything else, it's like, oh, that is going to change everything. Or you don't even look at that as much now. Your eye catches this area here. So the quickest you get everything to 90%, then you go back and be like, okay, where do I need to put attention? And that way you also can put it in front of the client or the director to review, or your soup. So that way they can say, okay, well, I like all this, or change the direction completely.
Well, that's the thing. You need to give your soup time to soak it into. You need to give them time to address the look, and you can't sit on it noodling technical aspects and technical details, because there are so many times where you'll sit there trying to get edges looking right in a certain area, and the next thing you know, they'll change the environment, and all that edge work you did to pull back in because you had, a bright sky is now getting dark, so the hair just marries in a little easier, and you just spent all that time before they actually had a chance to look at it, and next thing you know, they're like, oh yeah, environment's going to be changing all that anyways. You're like, oh, come on,
god damn it,
you son of a, so it's, I think that's kind of one of the big hurdles of it, getting through that. But that's part of it goes back to the venting. You kind of need that to take a step back, so you can be objective and reapproach the shot from a different angle.
Yep. It's also when you have those midnight wake up, reach for your iPhone, start writing notes down about how you're going to get the shot done.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's like, I figured it out.
You ever have those epiphanies when you're in bed, you wake up and you're just like, okay, write yourself a note so that way you send yourself an email so it's in your inbox the next day.
Yep. It's like, what the hell was I thinking? It's so simple, I get it now. I've had a lot of those recently.
Or sometimes you write the note while you're half asleep and you're like, none of this makes any sense.
I actually just found it yesterday. I was going through notes, and autocorrect must have had a field day, because I literally was constructing completely different sentences, and I'm like, whatever that was, it probably was really vital, and I don't know anymore.
I bet that would have sold the shot, but for some reason I just cannot figure for the life of me what
reminds me of an episode of Seinfeld where he had like this little napkin, on his hotel, when he was staying in LA somewhere, and he wrote down the perfect joke, which was going to be for his show, and the cleaner threw out the napkin. And his whole show bombed because he had that one joke which was going to sell everything, and without it was just like, it's like, I had this one pivotal piece. So obviously on that show, I mean, we've talked about this, but you dealt with a lot of stress and like dealing with burnout and everything else, and I think that's a pretty crucial thing. I mean, how did you handle that, and what was it like on that project? Especially considering that you had long distance relationship, you were at the end of a big project, but still a lot to go. Yeah.
A lot of breakdowns. Everybody there had breakdowns. It was crazy. It was in their own ways. Everybody has their own sort of internal moments. But I remember my buddy Ben Morgan. He would come down and it's 2:00 in the morning. He's working on a trailer shot, and he'd come down. He would show me this stuff and just trying to figure things out on our shots, and it turns into him talking about what he's trying to do on his shot, and then I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to do on my shot, and then we're both just bitching with each other, and it was pretty cool, because at the same time, like, you're listening to each other while you're bitching about your own stuff, and you just get it off your chest. I mean, that was important. But I think at that time, you kind of have to take some time away. Like, we were on 7-day weeks for about 6 weeks, so it's really hard to take that time away.
And those days were long days, and
they're 16-hour days sometimes, so you're really pushing the envelope, and
I'm not good at math or anything, but that's about 500 hours a week.
It's pretty close to 5, maybe 4 or 5, I think.
Let me get my calculator. Yeah. Oh, I was way
off. It was I feel like in that time when you're dealing with that stress, it's looking at the people next to you. Without a doubt, that's the biggest thing that gets me through it, is knowing that you're there.
At least I'm not screwed as the guy next to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, there are guys, I complain about some of the stuff I had, and then I look at the barrel sequence, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm sorry,
I
guys.
remember you describing me the barrel sequence when you were back at Christmas before. I think I had seen it.
Holy
and
shit.
Yeah.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. The amount of work that went into that was incredible.
It got criticized a lot though too.
It did,
but I think it's more because it's just a very stylized, comical,
At the end of the day, you know what? I learned something. I learned something really, really important on that show, and I've tried to keep it with me since I left. Is until you know what the person sitting in the seat had to deal with, it's good to hold comments until you actually see what they had to deal with. And man, the stuff that they had was just, I mean, a lot of the stuff was getting looked at, getting close to final, so we really, you can only spend so much time with that volume of work, you can only spend so much time and stuff, but at the end of the day, the amount of detail that went into it was incredible. And yeah, just marrying the CG into the plate, and then, doing the digi-doubles. The marrying of the digi-doubles was just incredible, so at the end of the day, I had nothing really to complain about. My stuff was pretty cut and dry compared to some of this other stuff that these guys that had been there for 10 years were dealing with.
I'll intervene real quick and just say, like, that's one thing I've kind of learned reviewing reels is just, you look at some stuff and you're like, man, like, all this stuff's great, and then there's like this one shot is terrible, and like, you got to at least kind of bite your tongue until you hear the story, because
exactly
9 times out of 10 maybe it's just the client has decided.
A lot of the times a client just says, you know what,
I want glow on a white background.
I want do me a favor, get rid of the atmosphere, and you're like, but that's what's selling it right now. Like, right. I don't know, I just feel like the Atmo is just not really working right here. I don't want it, and I want to see more of the background. Wouldn't look like that, and at the end of the day, it's up to them. It's their film, so you're not really always. You can only do what you can do. You can only make your suggestions, but you can't dictate the end result. So it's I think that was the hardest part. That was one of the things that really kind of helped you get through it, is looking at what everybody else is doing and being in that muck together. And
I remember you telling me that there was that kind of breaking point where you were kind of hitting your limits, and even just communicating to your team or your supervisor or lead that, look, I'm going through this right now, and rather than either hiding it and I've seen it not, at studios like that, but I've seen people where they do get to a point where they go into negativity, they go into hell because they feel like they need to retaliate because they feel like they're being victimized or whatever. And like, there's a lot of psychological stuff that people go through when they're going under so much pressure and sleep deprivation, as well as just total stress from being overwhelmed. And like, how you handle it's one thing, but also I think that learning to communicate that if you're at a breaking point, you just need to tell people, rather than, because I've seen this on a few projects, and I've never understood why certain people just suddenly start breaking things and getting really kind of acting like a 2-year-old. And the thing is that, like, if you say to people, look, I need time out, or this is what I'm going through, people aren't gonna like, reprimand you. They're gonna say, I'll let you explain, but I mean, this is something I've seen a lot, and I think the way you described it was really great and spot on.
Well, I think when you're honest with your team, and you know where your limits are, and it's when you're at 100 hours a week and you haven't had a day off in 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and there were people there that were working, they hit 2 months without a day off. So you can imagine what 60 days straight of minimum 10 to 12 hour days will do to you. And 10 to 12 hours, I mean, then that's only Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday or towards the end of the week when you have to start getting your numbers in, you hit 18 hours. So people hit their breaking points, and they have to vent, and they have to get those, like, I need to take a step back. And some of the cool things were where you would say that, they'd be like, all right, here, just, I think one of the good ideas would be spend another 2 hours on that, get that up for review so we can get that out the door, and then jump on this over here. And it's good because you kind of need that. You kind of need that moment where you feel like you're being supported by your soups, and your soups have your best interests at heart as well as getting the film done. And ultimately it goes hand in hand. If they're looking out for your best interests, the film's going to get done a lot better than what it would be anyways. So, but I remember, I would talk to Ben, and I would say, like, listen, like, dude, I'm pushing this as far as I can. And Ben's like, all right, well, why don't you just finish that up and then just get your eyes on something new, get excited about something else. And that's kind of what it did, was those conversations were saying, don't stop stressing on this. Don't worry about it.
Sounds like a Journey song.
I know, right?
Don't stop.
I couldn't. I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, there was those conversations that really made you want to work harder, and those conversations also gave me a second wind. Where you feel like you're by yourself in that cube, doing your shop by yourself, but when you get out and you say, listen, I'm hitting a wall with this, and whether your breaking point is just because of your hours or just because you're hitting a creative wall with what you're doing technically or creatively with how to make it look, opening yourself up to your soups and being honest and being like, listen, I'm having a hard time. Can you help me out with this? I mean, that's ultimately what it's all about. You're all part of a team. It's not, nobody's doing this by themselves, especially this industry involves and requires camaraderie and teamwork. So being able to look at your soup and trust your soup and having them say, all right, we'll try this, and if that doesn't work, honestly, man, just take a step away from it. Like, it doesn't have to go out today. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to go out this week. If it pushes, we'll just do another shot. We'll find another one this week and we'll do that one next week, and that would be that, like that moment where you could take a step back and say, all right, cool.
I'm gonna schedule a hangover.
I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go to the bar at 4 a.m. We'll stay there for 2-3 hours. We'll go get 2 hours of sleep. We'll go back to work. And for some reason, I felt better, even though I was more tired. I felt better. I got to.
You got a reason to live again.
Exactly, But I think that it really came down to, that's why the soups were so critical on that, because you've got all these different people, and especially they had 150 compositors on Hobbit, so you have 150 people there, and a lot of new people. That was my first time at Weta, so there's a lot of new people that you don't know who works in what way, how they work. So it's a lot of getting to know you, and they spent a lot of there was those moments where that was that moment where I would say, that's fine. I feel better now. I'll go finish this now. And you build that relationship with your soups that makes you want to try harder. Where they give you that respect, I'll return that respect tenfold at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the important part of being a soup.
We'll wrap it up in a sec, but just curious, because you're saying there's a lot of guys who came in who are fresh off the boat, literally into Weta. Were there anyone you kind of witnessed who are coming in kind of like, you know what, in the real world, I'm a big deal. and I'm gonna make a great impression here? No, I didn't. That's a crazy thing. I think they get screened out early on. And the thing about that is that at that place, it's pretty much referral. It is. That's one thing I was going to bring up. It's pretty much all referral. So you're not going to be there if you're a PUD. A good friend of mine who passed away a while back now, but Richard Barker. I think I've mentioned him actually before, but when we were talking about this, but he was the line producer for all the Lord of the Rings movies, as well as doing Willow and everything else back in the day as well. And so obviously he worked very closely with Peter Jackson, and he was where I first learned that about Weta, because they were recruiting for Lord of the Rings 1 at the time, or Fellowship. And he's saying that, it takes 10 minutes to call up or ask someone in the room, like, did you work with someone? It's like, really talented, but a total dick. And it's like, okay, great, tear up the resume. Yep. And that's all it takes, rather than bringing someone in, going through the visa process, everything to find out they've got the biggest ego. It's a lot of work to get people over there. Yeah. And it's a lot of work. And to find out that they butt heads with everyone, Yeah. And, there's the quarters are pretty close, like you're literally, I'm sitting 4 feet from somebody to my right, and then I'm sitting 4 feet from somebody in front of me, and I'm sitting in this cubicle. You need to make sure that everybody in that room gets together and everybody jives. And that was really just awesome. People there were so fun. Everybody had such a great sense of humor, and people were really chill, and it was kind of cool to sort of see how there really are that many
awesome people to work with in this industry. And when you ask about, what it was like getting there for the first time and everything, and it was that feeling of being around such humble people. Nobody spoke like they were, king shit. Everybody felt like they were part of something. Nobody said I did this or I did that or I had to save. Nobody said that.
Yeah.
I never heard that, and so there wasn't a whole lot of smack talk. People genuinely worked together. And that's so rare, because you go to small teams, other places, and you're working on a project that nobody's ever going to see. And
you got the biggest egos in the world.
You got these huge egos where everybody's like hoarding. Everybody puts their arms around their scripts and is like, oh, I don't really want to talk about this.
Yeah,
everybody's like, everybody's super, super cool with explaining how they do stuff. And I had a problem with one of my shots, and Ben's a really technical guy and super, super smart. And I was having a hard time figuring out how one of these matrices worked. And I said, listen, I said, I'm going to be here for probably another, this is going to set me back like another 2 days if I have to, reverse engineer this. And basically I'll just end up starting over. And he's like, all right, cool, I'll take a look. And he ended up spending his own time looking at it and helped me out. And then he ends up emailing me. He's like, hey, half a day later, he spent half a day of his own time on this, and he ends up emailing me. He's like, hey, so I think I figured this out, and he sent me the link. I'm like, holy shit. And that is the essence of what it was of what that place was about. And everybody was like that. People would take time to look at each other's stuff and say, hey, what do you think about this? So you didn't really have room to be a dick, because you wouldn't really fit in too well.
Did you have much interaction with Joel Lettieri?
No, Joe Lettieri and PJ.
Do you all have to like look at the ground whenever?
No, I had to. It was kind of weird giving them tea with a shaking on the dish. It was. I didn't really get to see them much. We would VLC into our dailies. So
okay, I didn't know that. So dailies was never in a group room?
No.
Wow.
Dailies. Well, okay, so we'd have two dailies. We'd have dailies with our VFX soup, but there were every sequence had its own VFX soup. Mm-hmm. So there were ultimately maybe, I think, 4 or 5 VFX soups that were like sequence VFX soups, and then which I guess would kind of be like a DFX soup. And then that VFX soup would then meet with Lettieri, and they would present their stuff to Lettieri and PJ. And so we would have our dailies as our team, as our sequence stuff. But ultimately, Lettieri and we would have to get past our first VFX soup to get it to Lettieri and PJ. And then Lettieri and PJ would sit in a room, and they'd record it on the video, so we could see where they're pointing on the screen, whatever. And they would put the file, the video on the server, and then we would just sit there the next day and we would scrub to our shot in the timeline.
That's similar to how ILM does it for like the director, let's say. So the VFX soup will sit with the director and they'll go over shots. Those ones are closed room and you get the recordings. Whereas, but you do a FaceTime with the VFX soup. Yeah. So it's kind of similar. But all right, cool. And what was your last day at Wedderlac?
Man, that was crazy. They had asked me to extend to finish up apes, but because I when I first left, I had a conversation with my girlfriend that I was only going to go for 9 months, and the extension would have rolled me into almost a year if I took the extension to finish apes. So I had a conversation with her, and I said, listen, I'm going to stay 2 extra weeks, and I'm going to try to finish all my shots. And those last 2 weeks were slams. Like I was doing everything I could to get all my shots out the door. And my last day, I remember I spent quite a bit of time with Sam Cole that day, in and out of his office, showing him this, showing him that. And it was my last day was literally spent just finishing up. I trying to final like my last 2 or 3 shots and doing all my tech fixes on my shots, and ultimately I think 1 or 2 of them ended up not finishing. And it was a tough day, I gotta be honest. But not just mentally, but emotionally too, because I had really, after going through such a hard time there after going through hard emotionally, like after being with my girlfriend, and that was a big toll on being there. But after being there and dealing with that aspect and dealing with the hours, and so when you're dealing with those hours, the distance away from your partner makes it even harder. When you're on your 100th hour and you're going home by yourself. So at that last day, it was sort of like going around and getting to say goodbye to everybody who really kind of became something special to you.
Did you leave the property like feeling satisfied with what you had accomplished?
Yeah, I did. I had a big going away party the night before, and it was pretty cool, like getting to say goodbye to everybody and really having all the stories that happened on the show between Apes and Hobbit, and getting to reminisce about all that stuff. I thought about it the next day when I was leaving, and it was I really feel like I did what I wanted to do there. I mean, I wanted to finish Apes, and that was a hard thing because I've never walked away from a show halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
So to do that was pretty difficult. But at the end of the day, I felt okay with it because I felt great with the relationships, and I feel good about the work that I did. So
great.
It was good. Things kind of made sense when I left.
Cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll wrap it up, but you're back at DD now, working commercials.
Yeah.
Is DD Features doing anything, or is it completely kind of...
No, DD Features is still, they're still busy. I mean, there's still a lot of work that they're doing. They just kicked out the, I think they have Fast 7 in-house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so they have Fast 7, I think Pixels.
Oh, right, yeah. A few of my friends at Sony are doing that.
Yeah,
I didn't even know about it.
That stuff looks great.
Sent a short the other day.
It looks awesome. But yeah, I mean, DD Features is, I mean, I don't ever think that they're going to go away.
I know. I keep hearing, like, okay, after this project they're done, and then
No.
I'll bump into someone and it's like, oh, yeah, I'm swooping
No
over
way.
it. It's like, what the hell? Yeah.
No, I don't think that they'll ever go away, and I think that that's a great thing. I mean,
They shouldn't.
No, you still have some of those old school.
John Texture should step away.
Maybe he should stay away, far away. They still have a bunch of the really old school DDers are still there, like the people from way back when, It's hard to justify getting rid of such talent, because they proved that it's the person in the seat, not the box. You can have $1 million worth of computers in one room, but it's bupkis, it's bullshit if you don't have people that know what they're doing at the
Absolutely.
box. And those people are just genuinely incredible. What is one of the only other places I've ever witnessed such talent under one roof. So, and the other thing too is with commercials. The commercials and features pipeline are getting sort of there's becoming a sort of seamless transition between I won't say seamless, but there's becoming more.
The feature pipeline is probably being assimilated into the commercial pipeline.
Exactly, yeah. So, which is good too, because then it opens up for the commercial artists to be able to work on features as well when they're slow, and vice versa. But they're still doing really well. They've still got a lot of work in house. And
actually, I'm gonna try and get Neil Huxley, one of the directors over at DD, on here. Yeah, like I've known him since like over 10 years, like back in Australia even.
Oh no shit.
Yeah, and but yeah, I want to try and get him on just because I think that would be a really fun one to kind of talk to, especially knowing him back then and knowing what his goals were. It always was to direct, and for him to end up at Digital Domain directing.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him that like last year. It's just like, yeah, I remember having conversations about this, and like, look where you are.
It's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, he's doing amazing work.
Yeah. And there's still the commercials, some of the stuff that they're directing is just awesome. I mean, it's a really creative, stylish, hip place. A lot of their stuff is the commercials for the most part that they do are usually the kind of things that I would want to watch. The YouTube, there's that commercial where I could skip the ad. It's if that was the work that they do is one of the commercials, I wouldn't skip the ad. I just watch the commercial before the YouTube video plays.
I'm always kind of like deconstructing commercials when I actually do not skip the ad, because
Yeah.
I'm like, what was it about this that's actually making me not want to skip, and what the hell was I even going to watch in the first place?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So yeah, they're doing well.
any last bits of advice for anyone wanting to get into compositing and take over the world?
No, just love it.
Don't stop believing.
Just just where we break out into our school rock, whatever.
That's right.
I would just say this is the chairman of my school when I was in college. He said something to us on our orientation day. He said, real quickly, the people who want to do this are going to figure out if they want to do it or not. And if you don't want to do this, I suggest you get out real quick, because it's painful if you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you love doing this stuff, it's the 14th, 15th hours. And it sucks and it hurts, but that's it's not as bad. I'd rather be doing what I'm doing now than I would be doing anything. So I think if you just love it, not worry about the money aspect of it, and just keep pushing, I think people sort of recognize that. And those are the people that they want to have around, so just stay humble and just keep having fun with it.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well,
Thanks
thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Obviously, we covered a lot of really great stuff, and as you can hear, John is a really great guy. So I was really excited to do this episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said before, if you have any questions or ideas, subjects you want to cover, or if you have any events coming up that you want speakers for, then I'd love to find ways to contribute. So please let me know. And that being said, I've got some really cool content coming up. I'm going to do my best. December is by far going to be the busiest month for me, but I'm going to do my best to see if I can put out a few episodes every week for this month, especially gearing up towards Christmas, focusing on solo content. Typically, I want them to be every 1 or 2 weeks, but this month I really want all of us to kind of step up a game and get ready for 2015. So I think this is going to be a chance to do some really cool stuff, and I'd love to get your input. What are your goals for 2015? Is there some big splash you want to make, whether you want to get into feature film, whether you want to shift your careers around a little bit, whether you want to understand more about how to launch a studio and how to work from home, whatever it's going to be. I'd love to see what you guys have in mind and what your goals are for 2015. So leave a comment on allanmckay.com/8. That's the number 8 for episode 8, or else shoot me an email. So that's it for now, guys. Thanks again, and I look forward to doing the next episode.